On the morning of March 3rd, 2019, 32-year-old Rebecca Lawson walked into St. Catherine's Church in Portland, Oregon, carrying a burden she had held for nearly 8 years. She had rehearsed what she would say 1,000 times. The words were written on a folded piece of paper in her pocket. She came to confess something that had haunted every waking moment since she was 24 years old. But when she entered the confessional booth and knelt in the darkened space, something impossible happened. Before she could speak, before she could explain why she had come, the priest on the other side of the screen said her name. Not a greeting, not a question. He said her full name with certainty, as though he had been expecting her. What followed would unravel a mystery that had remained buried for nearly a decade and expose a truth far darker than Rebecca had ever imagined. Chapter 1. The Weight of Silence. Rebecca Lawson had been living with a secret that slowly consumed her from the inside. To those around her, she appeared to be managing well enough. She worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, kept a modest apartment in southeast Portland, and maintained a handful of friendships. But beneath the surface, Rebecca was unraveling. The secret she carried dated back to the summer of 2011. She had been 24 years old, fresh out of college, and sharing an apartment with her best friend, Amanda Graves. The two had been inseparable since their sophomore year at Portland State University. Amanda was outgoing, adventurous, and impulsive. Rebecca was quieter, more cautious, and often found herself following Amanda's lead. That summer, Amanda became involved with a man named Derek Milligan. He was older, charming in a reckless way, and involved in activities that made Rebecca uneasy. Amanda dismissed her concerns, insisting Derek was misunderstood. The relationship escalated quickly, and within weeks, Amanda was spending most nights at Derek's apartment across town. On the night of August 12, 2011, everything changed. Amanda called Rebecca in a panic, her voice barely coherent, broken by sobs and frantic breathing. She said something terrible had happened and that Rebecca needed to come immediately. Rebecca grabbed her keys and drove to Derek's apartment without hesitation. When she arrived, the scene was chaotic. Derek was pacing, visibly agitated, and Amanda was sitting on the floor, trembling and covered in blood. On the couch lay a man Rebecca had never seen before. He was not moving. Derek explained in hurried, disjointed sentences that the man had broken in, that there had been a struggle, and that things had gotten out of control. Amanda kept repeating that it was an accident, that she had only been trying to defend herself. Rebecca's mind raced. She did not know what to believe, but she knew Amanda was terrified and Derek was spiraling. Without fully understanding what she was doing, Rebecca helped them. She cleaned surfaces, disposed of evidence, and followed Derek's instructions as he worked to conceal what had happened. Hours later, the body was gone, moved to a location Rebecca was never told. By dawn, the apartment looked undisturbed. Amanda and Derek left Portland within days. They told friends and family they were starting fresh in another state, chasing opportunities and seeking adventure. Rebecca stayed behind, left alone with the knowledge of what they had done and the role she had played in covering it up. For months, Rebecca waited for the police to arrive at her door. She scoured news reports for any mention of a missing person, a body discovered, or an investigation launched. But nothing came. The silence was deafening. The man whose life had ended that night seemed to have vanished without anyone noticing or caring. As time passed, the absence of consequences became its own torment. Rebecca could not move forward, could not reconcile the person she believed herself to be with the actions she had taken. She distanced herself from old friends, avoided social gatherings, and withdrew into herself. Sleep became difficult. Anxiety became constant. The weight of silence pressed down on her every day, and she knew she could not carry it forever. By 2019, Rebecca had reached a breaking point. She had not spoken to Amanda or Derek in years. She did not know where they were or whether they ever thought about that night. But Rebecca thought about it constantly. She needed to unburden herself, to speak the truth aloud, even if it meant facing punishment. She considered going to the police and telling them everything. But before she could bring herself to walk into a station, she thought of one other place: the church. Rebecca had not been religious in years, but the idea of confession offered something the police could not: absolution. She wanted to say the words out loud to someone who might understand the gravity of what she carried. She wanted to admit her guilt in a space where forgiveness was possible, even if justice was not. On the morning of March 3rd, Rebecca walked into St. Catherine's Church for the first time in nearly a decade. She did not know the priest. She did not know if confession would bring her peace. She only knew she could no longer carry the weight alone. Chapter 2: The Impossible Recognition. St. Catherine's Church sat on a quiet corner of northeast Portland, its brick facade weathered by decades of rain and wind. It was a modest building, unremarkable from the outside, but inside, the space held a stillness that Rebecca found both comforting and unsettling. She had arrived early, before the morning mass, when the church was nearly empty. A few elderly parishioners knelt in prayer near the front pews. Candles flickered along the side altars, casting soft shadows across the walls. Rebecca stood near the entrance for several minutes, gathering her courage, rehearsing the words she had written and rewritten in her mind. The confessional booth was tucked into an alcove on the left side of the sanctuary. It was an old-fashioned wooden structure, divided by a lattice screen that allowed voices to pass through while maintaining anonymity. Rebecca approached slowly, her hands trembling, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might be audible. She pulled open the door and stepped inside. The space was cramped and dark, lit only by a thin sliver of light from the church beyond. She knelt on the small padded bench, clasped her hands together, and waited for the priest to acknowledge her presence. There was a faint rustling on the other side of the screen, the sound of someone settling into position. Rebecca took a deep breath, preparing to speak the words she had practiced. But before she could utter a single syllable, the priest spoke first, saying her full name with absolute certainty. Rebecca froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She had not introduced herself. She had not said anything at all. The anonymity of confession was supposed to be sacred. The priest was not supposed to know who knelt on the other side of the screen. Yet he had spoken her name, as though he had been expecting her arrival. What followed was even more incomprehensible. The priest told her he knew why she had come. He knew about something that had happened 8 years ago. He knew about August 12, 2011. He knew about Amanda Graves and Derek Milligan. And he knew about the man who had died that night. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more frightening than the last. Had someone told him? Had Amanda or Derek resurfaced? Was this a trap orchestrated by law enforcement? She gripped the edge of the bench, her knuckles white, torn between fleeing and demanding answers. When she asked how he knew these things, the priest's response shattered what remained of her composure. He told her that the man who had died that night was his brother. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Rebecca pressed her hand against the screen, struggling to comprehend what she was hearing. The stranger on the couch, the man whose face she had tried for years to forget, had a name. He had a family. He had a brother who had spent 8 years searching for answers. The priest explained that his brother's name was Nathan Cole. He had been 28 years old, struggling with addiction, trying to rebuild his life. The night he died, he had gone to Derek's apartment looking for money he believed Derek owed him. What happened after that had remained a mystery until now. According to what Rebecca would later tell investigators, the priest revealed he had become clergy 2 years after Nathan disappeared. He had needed purpose, needed to believe there was meaning in suffering. But he had never stopped looking for the truth. He had tracked Amanda and Derek across state lines, found records, spoken to witnesses, and pieced together fragments of that night. Eventually, his search had led him to Rebecca's name. The priest had learned everything he could about her. He had studied her life, her isolation, her withdrawal from the world. He recognized the patterns of someone carrying unbearable guilt. 3 years earlier, he had requested a transfer to St. Catherine's Parish and waited, believing that eventually Rebecca's burden would drive her to seek confession. His prediction had been correct. After 8 years of silence, Rebecca had walked through the doors of the very church where Nathan's brother served, bringing with her the truth he had spent nearly a decade trying to uncover. Chapter 3: the truth emerges. What transpired in that confessional booth marked the beginning of a reckoning that would expose buried secrets and force multiple people to face consequences they had evaded for years. Rebecca later described the encounter as both terrifying and strangely liberating. She had come prepared to confess to an anonymous priest, to unburden herself in the traditional sacramental way. Instead, she found herself face to face with the very person her actions had harmed most directly, the brother of the man whose death she had helped conceal. The priest, later identified as Father Michael Cole, had spent years constructing a detailed timeline of his brother's final days. Through exhaustive research, he had traced Nathan's movements, identified his associates, and mapped out the circumstances that had led him to Derek Milligan's apartment that August night. But without concrete evidence, without witnesses willing to speak, and without a body, law enforcement had been unable to pursue the case. Nathan Cole had simply become another missing person with a troubled history. Father Cole's investigation had been methodical and persistent. He had traveled to Arizona, following leads on Derek and Amanda's whereabouts. He had interviewed people who knew them, searched through their past relationships, and eventually discovered mention of Rebecca, a close friend who had abruptly distanced herself around the time Nathan disappeared. This connection had given him a new avenue to explore. Over the following months, Father Cole had compiled information about Rebecca. He located her social media profiles, tracked her employment history, and observed the patterns of her life from a distance. What he saw confirmed his suspicions. Rebecca exhibited all the behavioral markers of someone living under the weight of profound guilt, social isolation, career stagnation, and an inability to form meaningful new relationships. Rather than confronting her directly or going to the police with his suspicions, Father Cole made a calculated decision. He requested a transfer to St. Catherine's Church, the parish closest to Rebecca's apartment. He reasoned that if she carried the kind of guilt he suspected, she would eventually seek a way to unburden herself. The church, with its promise of confidential confession and spiritual absolution, seemed like the natural destination for someone seeking relief from a secret too heavy to carry. For 3 years, Father Cole waited. He performed his duties as a parish priest, led masses, counseled parishioners, and maintained his vigil. He never approached Rebecca directly, never revealed his presence in her neighborhood, never forced the confrontation. He simply positioned himself in the path she would likely take when she could no longer bear the weight alone. His patience was rewarded on March 3, 2019, when Rebecca entered the confessional booth seeking to confess a crime she had helped conceal 8 years earlier. The encounter in the confessional lasted nearly 40 minutes. Rebecca later reported that Father Cole did not express anger or demand immediate action. Instead, he spoke about his brother's life, the pain his disappearance had caused their family, and the years spent searching for answers that seemed forever out of reach. He described the toll of not knowing, of being unable to properly mourn, of carrying hope and dread in equal measure. Father Cole told Rebecca he could not force her to go to the police. He could not compel her to face legal consequences. But he made clear that his brother deserved to be remembered, that Nathan's life and death deserved acknowledgement, and that carrying the secret had already punished her in ways the justice system never could. When Rebecca emerged from the confessional, she and Father Cole stood facing each other for the first time without the screen between them. No words were exchanged beyond a brief introduction. But something fundamental had shifted. The secret that had existed only in Rebecca's mind, protected by silence and distance, was now shared knowledge. The possibility of continued concealment had ended. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. 2 days after her encounter with Father Michael Cole, Rebecca Lawson walked into the Portland Police Bureau's Central Precinct and requested to speak with a detective about a cold case. She carried with her the folded piece of paper from her pocket, the one on which she had written her original confession, and a determination that had taken 8 years to build. Detective Sarah Brennan, a veteran investigator with over 15 years of experience in cold cases, was assigned to interview her. Rebecca sat across from Brennan in a small interview room, and for the next 3 hours, provided a detailed account of everything she remembered about the night of August 12, 2011. She described Amanda's frantic phone call, the scene at Derek's apartment, the deceased man on the couch, and the subsequent actions taken to conceal what had happened. Detective Brennan listened carefully, taking extensive notes and asking clarifying questions. The information Rebecca provided aligned with fragments of intelligence that had accumulated over the years regarding Nathan Cole's disappearance. Her testimony filled in gaps that investigators had been unable to close, providing the concrete details necessary to move forward with a formal investigation. Armed with Rebecca's statement, detectives reopened the case. They issued warrants and began tracking down the other individuals involved. Derek Milligan was located living under an assumed name in Las Cruces, New Mexico. When confronted with Rebecca's testimony and supporting evidence investigators had gathered, Derek admitted to his role in Nathan's death and provided the location where the body had been buried, a remote area of forest approximately 40 miles outside Portland. Recovery teams were dispatched to the site Derek identified. After 2 days of careful excavation, human remains were discovered buried beneath several feet of soil and debris. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains were those of Nathan Cole, missing since August 2011. The medical examiner determined that Nathan had died from blunt force trauma consistent with a physical altercation. Amanda Graves was located in Austin, Texas, working under her maiden name. When contacted by investigators, she initially denied any knowledge of Nathan's death. However, when presented with Rebecca's testimony and Derek's confession, Amanda eventually corroborated much of the account. She confirmed that Nathan's death had resulted from a confrontation that escalated violently when he came to Derek's apartment demanding money. According to the statements provided by all 3 individuals, Nathan had been involved in drug-related activities with Derek months earlier. When Derek failed to pay Nathan what he was owed, Nathan showed up at the apartment, confrontational and aggressive. A physical fight ensued. Derek struck Nathan multiple times with a heavy object. Amanda attempted to intervene, but froze when she realized Nathan was not moving. Panicked and unsure what to do, Amanda called Rebecca for help. Both Derek and Amanda were arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter and tampering with physical evidence. Rebecca was charged as an accessory after the fact for her role in helping conceal the crime and destroy evidence. Rebecca accepted full responsibility for her actions. She cooperated completely with the investigation, providing additional details that helped establish a comprehensive timeline. She expressed remorse for her choices and acknowledged the harm her silence had caused to Nathan's family over the years. At her sentencing hearing, Father Michael Cole appeared to provide a statement. He spoke about the years his family had spent not knowing what had happened to Nathan, the agony of uncertainty, and the impact of Rebecca's decision to finally come forward. He acknowledged that while Rebecca's actions 8 years ago had been reprehensible, her choice to provide the truth had given his family something they desperately needed: closure. The court took into account Rebecca's cooperation, her lack of prior criminal history, and the genuine remorse she demonstrated. She was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. It was a lenient outcome, one that reflected both her cooperation and the recognition that she had already served a prison sentence of her own making. Derek Milligan received 15 years in prison. Amanda Graves received 10 years. Both accepted plea agreements rather than going to trial. Nathan Cole's remains were returned to his family. A memorial service was held at St. Catherine's Church, attended by relatives, childhood friends, and members of the parish community. Rebecca attended, sitting quietly in the back pew, her presence serving as both an acknowledgement of what had happened and a silent apology to those who had suffered. In the months following her sentencing, Rebecca began the difficult work of rebuilding her life. She continued her therapy, fulfilled her community service requirements, and gradually reconnected with the world she had withdrawn from. The weight she had carried for 8 years was gone, replaced by a different burden: the responsibility of living honestly with the truth. Father Michael Cole continued his work at St. Catherine's. He had finally obtained the answers he had sought for so long. His brother's death had been confirmed, the circumstances explained, and those responsible held accountable. While it did not erase the loss, it provided a resolution that had seemed impossible for nearly a decade. The case of Rebecca Lawson and Nathan Cole serves as a stark reminder that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, carry a weight that eventually demands to be lifted. Guilt does not disappear with time. It grows heavier, more consuming, until the only path forward is through the truth, no matter how painful that truth may be. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more true crime investigations that explore the complex choices people make and the consequences that follow.